Hi, it's me again. Sorry, thank you for your patience. Now, I think a lot of us have this buzzword. I know a lot of things that started out with carbon credits and everything is like, ooh, mystified. Then we had biochar and we've had all manner of things. Hydrogen, I think, is the new kid on the block, as far as I'm concerned anyway. And we're now going to turn to one of the most exciting and potentially transformative conversations of this conference, hydrogen. Hydrogen is no longer a distant prospect, all right? For Kenya, it represents opportunities in energy security, fertilizer production, and even new export markets. At the same time, it raises critical questions about policy, financing, sustainability, and partnerships. To set the stage, we are honored to begin with a keynote address that combines both vision and practical insights. Please join me in welcoming, and I'm sorry if I say your name wrong, right? Ms. Nangauma Kone, manager, this is a recent promotion for her, by the way. She's now manager for Africa Strategy and Partnership and head of Kenya office at GGGI, delivering her keynote on how hydrogen fits into Africa's green transition. So please welcome Ms. Kone.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. I'm so sorry we chimed into your tea break, so we hope that it's going to be worth it. I'm Nangauma Kone, and I oversee the Kenya office for the Global Green Growth Institute. I know a lot of you might have heard or might have not heard about the GGGI, and that's because we've only been in Kenya officially in terms of operationalizing the office here for the last 3 weeks. But since a year and a half, we have been flying in and out and working mostly with the National Treasury and the Ministry of Environment, as well as the State Department for Energy. So that's a little bit about who we are. All right. So first and foremost, I want to thank all of you for being here today, as well as KenGen for organizing this incredible summit that has brought us all here not only to learn about what's happening in terms of renewable energy in Kenya, but also in the region, because yesterday there were sessions about other East African countries. And I think platforms like this is actually what's going to leapfrog renewable energy potential, not only in Kenya, but also in East Africa, because one of the things that's more important is how can we learn from each other, and more importantly, how can we ensure that we are sharing innovative knowledge. So since yesterday, one of the things we've been hearing, and I think something that has been solidified, is that Kenya is a celebrated leader when it comes to renewable energy. And indeed, this is, I think, a great success, not only for Kenya, but also in East Africa, to show that there is potential, especially for regional, when you're talking about regional integration. However, as was spoken earlier, one of the aspects that we keep on forgetting about is green hydrogen, more importantly, clean hydrogen. And this often takes a back seat, yet it has been considered as the newest kid on the block. The reason is simple. Unlike geothermal or hydro, hydrogen production is still nascent, right? Because it requires a lot. First, it requires electrolyzers, steady supplies of renewable power, and significant upfront investment, all of which Kenya is still nascent in. Up to now, I believe that we can all agree that the opportunity before us is actually enormous, not only in green hydrogen, but how can we be able to ensure that we can rightly use incredible energy mix. So if electricity is the bloodstream of our energy system, this is what I heard yesterday, because it sustains our home businesses and everyday lives, hydrogen can become the muscle, and this is what we at the Global Green Growth Institute believe. because hydrogen can power the heavy lifting of fertilizer production, industry, and long-distance transport, and even beyond that. Without it, that is, without hydrogen being included in the energy mix, our transition, that is in East Africa as well as in Africa, but also Kenya, into energy sustainability and green growth risks to be incomplete and taking a longer time to be realized. This session, this energy summit as well, has shown us that Kenya has a unique advantage to build on its geothermal baseload. Few countries in Africa can actually boast to that, and I think that's incredible for the country, because with its year-round renewable energy, and when you combine that together with the right investments and partnership, geothermal in particular can actually anchor Kenya's green hydrogen production by complementing both solar, wind, and positioning Kenya as a leader both in Eastern Africa as well as in Africa. At the Global Green Growth Institute, I'm going to give you a very small introduction into GGGI, who we are, so that everything can actually be solidified, is that we are supporting Kenya already. And I had mentioned earlier that although we are very new in terms of operationalization of our office here since August, we have been working very closely with certain line ministries. And one of the initiatives that we have started since 2024 is the Catalyzing Finance for Green Hydrogen project, which we do together with the State Department for Energy. And here our objective is to support the mobilization of capital, build partnerships, and support the de-risking of early initiatives. While we do take into account that Kenya is still nascent in the journey, we do believe it has the potential to actually pioneer when it comes to green hydrogen in Africa, because it does show as an emerging economy, it does show a lot of potential. And as all of you have already mentioned, Kenya is already really revolutionizing when you're talking about energy. So therefore, green hydrogen in total shouldn't be something that should be taking long to offtake. However, with the right mechanisms in place, we do believe that this is something that can actually be much more quicker and faster. So with that done, I'm just going to give you a short introduction of first who we are as the Global Green Growth Institute, because yesterday we did discuss finance and we also did discuss partnerships and we've discussed innovation. And this is what we do when we want to talk about green hydrogen. At least it will give us a glimpse, it will give you a glimpse of what we do and potentially perhaps further communication beyond this area to see how we can collectively collaborate when it comes to Kenya. I do not have So what is the Global Green Growth Institute? We like to use the acronym GGI or GGGI. So the Global Green Growth Institute was actually established in 2012, and we are a very new international organization. It's an intergovernmental organization that actually has its headquarters in Seoul, South Korea. And our mandate is very simple. How can we collectively work with the government, who is our key beneficiaries, in order to support them to be able to achieve net zero and, of course, to leapfrog into green economies? All right, let's stand here. Yeah. As I already mentioned earlier, our mission is, of course, how do we support countries become greener? That is a green economic model. And this is what we are doing in Kenya by having an office. In Africa, there are 12 countries that are member countries or member states of GGGI, but in total, there are 55 countries globally that work closely and are member states of GGGI. We work closely with beneficiaries, which is the local government, and as well as other development partners, CSOs, NGOs, investment banks, and MDBs to ensure that we can support countries to become much more sustainable and, of course, achieve their green growth strategies, and also when you talk about achieving net zero and Paris Agreement. Maybe I might have to stand here. So I've mentioned Paris Agreement 2 times or maybe 3 times, and I've mentioned green economy and I've mentioned sustainable development growth. And this is because the president of the GGGI was the former Secretary General of the United Nations. This is Mr. Ban Ki-moon. But in addition to that, we have our deputy, we have our Director General, which you can see, Deputy Director General, and this is, of course, how our governance and leadership looks like. Now, what we do is, as I mentioned, how do we support this transition into a green economy and how do we help countries? We do that through 6 key areas. And the first one you will see for us is climate and green finance. And here is how do we support member countries to be able to mobilize and catalyze green investments. Secondly, we also move into policy. We also believe that an enabling policy environment is actually key and instrumental in sustainable development growth. And then we move to the sectors. Here we are looking at the bioeconomy. And here we are looking at how do we, when you're talking about enabling environments, there has to be sectors in which these enabling environments do work in. You're looking at climate smart agriculture, you're looking at sustainable forestry, among others. But most importantly, making cities livable. Today, we heard a lot about what can we do when it talks to the grid and making cities livable. We all know that cities are becoming much more larger. They're moving into forests and there's a lot of encroachment. But beyond that, how do we ensure that even rural areas can be considered as livable cities? These are secondary cities. And more importantly, what we do is we have the Center of Poverty Reduction and Gender. Everything we do has to be gender inclusive, and everything we have to do, and when we work with our government, is ensuring the end in sight, which is poverty reduction. So I'd mentioned earlier 52 member countries, of which Kenya is the 50th country. Now, let me move into green hydrogen, and because that's what we are here for. That was just a short analysis about who we are as GGGI, just to set tone. So I'm going to introduce to you what we know as the Hydrogen to Green Growth for Sustainable Future. This is an initiative that has not yet been launched. So Kenya, you are the first one to see this PPT. It is going to be launched in a few weeks in Seoul, South Korea. So what is the global Hydrogen to Green Growth for Sustainable? This is an initiative that GGGI, the Global Green Growth Institute, is planning to roll out. And the objective of that is that we believe that for us to be able to support countries effectively, especially when it comes to energy poverty, is that we need to have the right energy mix. And one of the things that has been missing when you talk about energy mix is green hydrogen. And we do believe that green hydrogen or clean hydrogen, I don't want to say green hydrogen, I've been told to use the terminology clean hydrogen, is that it can be effectively be used to decarbonize. And it can be effectively be used to actually bring a lot of investment potential when you're talking about energy investments and energy finance, including infrastructure. So the objective of GGGI in this initiative is to support our member countries to be able to develop robust green hydrogen value chains. And this is talking from production to the use of green hydrogen. And we're talking about the whole value chain when it comes to green hydrogen. So I mentioned earlier our focus area and the value chain. We are looking at production. How can we support countries to produce green hydrogen effectively? Here we are even looking at carbon capture. We've mentioned that today, but a lot of the time when we are not discussing effective energy mix, we actually tend to take things in silos, yet it is a combination of a lot of factors. We talk about storage. A lot of the time when people discuss green hydrogen, it's always about the production. But for green hydrogen to be sustainable, for it to be effective, efficient, and also bringing in investment and capital, there has to be storage, and storage contributes also to effective distribution. But that's not all. Mobility, we've discussed that today, so I'm not going to discuss about mobility. I think there was the previous session did that a lot. But we're talking about industrialization, the link between green hydrogen and also industrialization. And this is why we actually believe that green hydrogen should not be taking a back seat when we talk about renewable energy. It actually needs to come to the fore because it has the potential to actually leapfrog us into effective energy policies, strategies, implementation, and even the investment mobilization that we've been hearing about yesterday, as well as H2 power. I'm not going to discuss that as well because that was power, renewable energy was discussed in the previous session. So what is our approach? I mentioned earlier, GGGI, we work with our member states. And this is working with our member countries into 4 areas. The first area is doing an assessment of where we are where's a country's potential when it comes to green hydrogen? How can we support them to be able to effectively either develop policies, strategy, mechanisms, or even incentivization tools that will be able to attract investors? Secondly, we also look at how do we create some form of matchmaking between projects that is existing in countries, or even support those projects to become much more bankable. You've heard a lot about bankability, but a lot of the time what people don't tell you is that a project is not just bankable. For a project to become effectively bankable, there are key criteria that have to be taken in place. And this is what we do. We look at those criteria that are needed for an investor to actually say that this particular project is bankable. And if it's not yet bankable or investment ready, how do we support our member countries to be able to take it to the next level? And we do that by working very closely, doing technical assistance, capacity building, knowledge exchange, and here, of course, most importantly, the regulatory framework. And when we look at the right side of the value chain, you're looking at partnering also, not only with the public sector, but also with the private sector. And for us, this has been key in creating the match, in ensuring that we can be able to mobilize investment. We are going to be using 4 approaches for this. Of course, the first one is analysis. Without a benchmark, it's very difficult to create something that is solid and sustainable and durable. Secondly, it's the design. So we first go to the benchmark, we then design, and then we conduct a technical assessment of what we've designed to ensure that what has been designed and what we have actually assessed is actually solid and robust, and also based on evidence. Third, and on the fourth, we now start supporting with the implementation. So this is what I mentioned about the whole value chain, ensuring that first is an assessment to ensure that everything we're doing is actually based on evidence, looking at the risks that are already there and trying to see how can we de-risk moving forward. We do have, as Triple GI, one of the things we have stringently is always our KPIs. Whenever we have an initiative, we tend to also look at the end. One thing we want to do is the reduction of up to 40 megatons of CO2. Mobilize and support our member countries to mobilize up to 60 billion, and of course work with our 50 member countries, of which Kenya is a member. So to do this, we will have, I was actually standing in the wrong place. To do this, we have the platform. So the platform is the pillar upon which this initiative will be based on. At the center of that is the Secretariat, which is managed by the Global Green Growth Institute. But on the left side, we have the forum. So the forum is actually where the knowledge management actually takes place. And this is where the partnerships are formed. And the platform is where the technical assistance is done. So there is actually a move between knowledge, capacity building, partnership, management of the initiative by the Secretariat, and of course, the technical assistance facility. I mentioned earlier, this is the structure of the initiative. As you can see, we have on the left side the forum. And the forum here is trying to see how can we work also with the government, but beyond government, I mentioned earlier, we also do work with other partners. And finally, the technical assistance facility, which is closely linked to the knowledge platform. So again, this is a little bit of detail of how the structure of the platform looks like. We're looking at the platform, but the platform is actually fed by working groups. Everything is based on evidence and everything is based on knowledge, because we actually believe this is where a lot of the gaps happen. When you're talking about infrastructure, when there is not a good feasibility or pre-feasibility study done, then the infrastructure developed usually tends to have issues, which creates risks. But in addition to that, it's also the knowledge and the enabling environment. If all of those are not so strong, it's really difficult to develop robust frameworks. Okay, so again, we are looking at here, we are looking at the platform, which is looking at the technical assistance capacity linked to knowledge platform. And together with that, we're going to be having the investment platform. So the investment platform is where we will be able to assess the projects that we get from member states. If we find that a project, if a member state says that a project, a green hydrogen project, is actually bankable or investment ready, we will have, it comes into this investment platform, and we do the assessment to try and see how can we support to ensure that first it is what it says, it is investment ready, or it is bankable, or it is policy ready, or we can support in a policy enabling environment for that. But in order to do that, we have to really check and screen the project effectively. And this again leads us back to the initial platform. So I mentioned earlier, the green hydrogen initiative is not just for governments. We work with government, with global partners, local partners, and also operators. And the reason we are showing you this is in case you do feel that there is an interest in also partnering with GGGI in any of your green hydrogen initiatives, if you have one or two, or even you want to partner with us on how we can be able to support you in some of the technical expertise that we have showcased today, please feel free to reach to us, because it's not only working directly with government, although governments are key beneficiaries. Here we tend to support policy, so there is a policy component, there is knowledge sharing component, most importantly networking, and the key is technical support. So the instruments we'll be using are grants, debts, risk equity, and carbon markets. I don't have to go into carbon markets because that was again said a lot. I wish the session was actually before, because carbon markets has been addressed as a key tool as well. And yesterday we discussed a lot about grants, debts, and concessional loans and aspects like that. So I will not be going too much into that. But what I wanted to show you is that the platform will be able to create a mix and match and support the projects that we receive to be able to get some form of funding or grants. And you can see the projects can be in all sides. So finally, our objective is to support clean hydrogen initiative and actually to bring clean hydrogen at the forefront, because we believe that hydrogen taking a back seat is actually a detriment to the pace at which renewable energy potential for the region is going to be. So for Africa to get to where it needs to be, in particular Kenya, where we've been discussing the importance of renewable energy to help us reduce the energy poverty, it has to be correctly done. The energy mix has to be effective, efficient, but most importantly, we should not be forgetting the role of green hydrogen. And so without further ado, this is the end of our presentation. I do believe that my colleagues will go into detail. Thank you.
Let's give a big round of applause. Thank you so much for a very insightful and very interesting presentation and keynote as well. As we have the microphone, as we have the podium removed, again, let's please appreciate Ms. Kone. So we're now going to go into our panel discussion that brings the opportunities she was talking about into sharper focus. Our panelists represent investment, they represent sustainability, they represent private capital, and also international development. These are four levers that must work together if hydrogen is to be moved from promise to practice. Allow me to introduce them. We have engineer Paul Wambogo, investment manager at KenGen, driving the utilities exploration of hydrogen opportunities. Karibu sana. We've got Dr. Jane Mbogo, who is acting assistant manager for sustainability at KenGen, ensuring projects align with ESG goals and climate resilience. Let's have a round of applause for both of them. Mr. Stephen Guru, principal at Investia, bringing the financials lens to hydrogen investment. Thank you so much, Mr. Guru. And we have Mr. Suhyun Kang, JPO, program development at GGGI, offering a development partner's perspective on project structuring and global linkages. So let's appreciate all of them again. Thank you. Karibu sana. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to again ask our panelists what we did at the very first panel. Keep it tight and bright so we can get a full 360-degree conversation going, and also try and include some audience participation as well. So Paul, let's begin with you. Kenya has set its sights on becoming a green hydrogen hub, right? From your vantage point at KenGen, what policy or regulatory measures would most help Kenya attract both global and local capital into hydrogen projects, particularly for storage and fertilizer manufacturing?
Thank you very much. I'll keep it short. So the first thing is that Kenya already has the ingredients for green hydrogen. We have the renewable energy, we have the water, we have sufficient land, and therefore we have all the factors necessary for production of green hydrogen. We also have a very vibrant private sector that are projects. Today we have about 8 gigawatts in terms of green hydrogen projects that have been received. I sit in the Secretariat of Green Hydrogen, and we have about 8 gigawatts of projects that have been received. So how do we then move these projects from just a concept to reality? The first thing is to make these projects bankable. So they need feasibility studies to enhance the bankability of those projects. Now, these developers, some of them require some sort of support to do the feasibility studies. And therefore, there is a need, and we have done as a country as a strategy on green hydrogen and a roadmap, there is a strategy to set up a financing facility or hydrogen bank where developers can access financing to do the de-risking part at the very early stage, where you de-risk the project by pushing it to bankability. The second thing that needs to be done is that once these feasibilities are done, we know today green hydrogen is more expensive than grey hydrogen. Therefore, we need, and this is what other countries are doing, something we call contracts for difference, where we bridge the gap between the cost of green hydrogen and the cost of grey hydrogen for a period of about 10 to 15 years, which is what most analysts are expecting, that there will be a drop. If you look at solar reduced in 10 years, it reduced its price for nearly 90%. The second thing we need to do is to create a hassle-free environment for investments to come and take place. So KenGen already has set up an energy park here in Olkaria. If you have a chance, you will visit it. Because investors who are going to be coming into green hydrogen, some of them and most of them are going to be foreign investors. They don't know about Kenya, they don't know about our local regulations, and therefore you need a one-stop shop, an easy place to go and do that. And lastly, without spending more time, is that we need to have proper standards and proper offtake arrangements. So we will be discussing some more on partnerships, but we need to have offtake for green hydrogen or offtake for the products that come out of these projects. And therefore, as a government and as utilities within the government, we need to work together, and we're already doing that to get offtake for green hydrogen projects.
Thank you. I'm going to keep it with within the KenGen family. Jane, I want to bring you in here right now. Every new technology carries risks. Everybody knows that. What sustainability safeguards must be built into Kenya's hydrogen development so that we don't repeat past mistakes in resource exploitation? Do you have another mic next to you?
Okay, thank you so much. I will begin by emphasizing that we live in communities that are very aware, and our resources are placed in some of the places that are marginalized and indigenous communities. And even as we move on to these projects, we have to put social safeguards in place, taking account we need a just transition. So we have to look at these communities and sort of move the journey with them. We have to really look at that. And one thing that we have to note is that green hydrogen is water intensive. So we may not be water insufficient as a country, but some places more than others are water stressed. So you'll want to look at the water facilities, the desalination plants and all that, put it into account so that in as much as we're exploiting green hydrogen, we don't make our water access suffer for the resources and use.
Thank you, Jane. Stephen, you've heard both Paul on policy and Jane talking about our safeguards. From an investor's perspective, what de-risks hydrogen projects in Africa? Start there and then go into what makes the difference between a project that remains on paper and one that secures serious financing.
Yeah, thank you. And my name is actually Gugu, the second name.
Sorry?
Gugu. That's G-U-G-U.
I'm so sorry, Mr.
You
Gugu.
call me Guru, so I think
he's a guru.
I can also check that.
I'm assuming he's a guru as well, yes. Sorry, yeah. Mr. Gugu.
No problem. So you asked about the de-risking element.
The de-risking element and the difference between,
Yeah. So if you think about de-risking, and maybe I should start with some work that we did for the Africa Green Hydrogen Alliance. And what we did is create a financial model, which was just looking at the green hydrogen space and asking, what do we need to do on a green hydrogen plant to make it more bankable in this case? And we did a sensitivity analysis around that. And we found that, in essence, you have sort of like 3 key factors that you need to think about. The first one is the cost of setup.
Okay.
Because when we adjusted the cost of setup, we found it had the biggest impact in the IRR, the returns for an investor, right? And if you look at that cost of setup, there's everything from the capex that you're spending, the electrolyzers and so forth. There's also the setup cost, the taxes you have to pay, the VAT, the import duties, all those different things. The cost of the land, are you going to get the land for free? Do you have to pay for the land and so forth? So there's some work that needs to be done around that to ensure that those costs, I mean, if it's the taxes in this case, that they're either reduced or at least as per the green hydrogen policy that we have in the government at the moment, it's looking at a situation where some of those costs, you'll get a break on them on taxes, VAT, and so forth, right? So there's that element. The second key factor that we found to be very important was the cost of power, right? Where are you getting your power from? And so from our analysis, if you reduced sort of like the cost of power, we found that it had the second major impact in terms of the overall return for the project. Now, the key question about renewable energy, and I think engineer has just mentioned here, is that if you look at what's the cost of sort of like, generating power from geothermal, from wind, from solar and so forth, solar is probably the lowest at the moment,
yes,
but the others are still expensive, right? And so, in our model, we use 10 cents in this case as a cost. Right. So if that is able to reduce over a period of time, and that's through technologies, in this case, it reduces the cost of the power itself in terms of how it's set up and so forth. So those are the other sort of like key factor we found. And the third item was the cost of borrowing. Right? How much does it cost to borrow for the project? And that's where the concession of financing comes in this case. And I really like some of the work that was just being mentioned by GGI just a moment ago in terms of how to think about how to finance the projects and how to get them off the ground. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Stephen. Suhyun, you've been the quiet one at the moment. So we've heard the Kenyan perspective on investment and risk and safeguards. How does GGI see hydrogen fitting into Kenya's broader energy transition strategy, right? And what lessons from other countries could help us accelerate responsibly?
Thank you very much for the question. And I think the international initiative, of course, the GGGI, we will launch the Hydrogen to Global Green Growth Initiative. This kind of initiative is really important for the emerging economy like Kenya, because this is kind of a playground for these countries. So, apart from the GGGI's initiative, there are so many initiatives that all the international partners are really participating in. For example, there is a Clean Energy Ministerial, which is the high-level dialogue for the policy, and also there is another initiative for the private sector called Hydrogen Council, which is backed by World Economic Forum. So there are so many initiatives that the emerging economy need to participate, and this will be really great advantage for the emerging economies to learn from the track record that has been accumulated from these initiatives. So, for example, when we see the policy, then we can see many hosting organizations who has the initiative have many track record on the best practice. And we need to, of course, consider the contextualization, and it will be really fine-tuned to the Kenyan context when it comes to policy and enabling environment. So participating this initiative is also very important, and the second part is investment. So when this hosting organization have this kind of initiative, it means they have already proven structure of the partnership. It means we can unlock various climate finance when it comes to hydrogen. using the already structured partnership from various donors and also investors as well. So I think in this regard, I think using this kind of international partnership is really important for Kenya. And I hope the H2G initiative also really supports the Kenya to really fasten up and boost the scale the green hydrogen project in Kenya.
Thank you so much. I'm going to shift gears slightly, come back to Kenya. And Paul, I want you now to chime in on this one. So statistically, Kenya currently spends about 100 billion Kenya shillings every year importing fertilizers, yeah? How can local green hydrogen to fertilizer production lower those costs? And what kind of partnerships are needed between agribusiness, government, and financiers to make this particular idea viable?
Thanks for that. So you've clearly stated we're spending a lot in terms of importing of fertilizer. The country's backbone, economic backbone, is agriculture. So it doesn't make sense for us to be importing fertilizer to use for our farms when agriculture is our mainstay. And therefore, there is a significant benefit in us localizing manufacture of fertilizer here. And we can only do that if we are able to attract those investors to come here. Previously, of course, we did not have the ingredients like hydrogen. Currently, the hydrogen that is used is from fossil fuel. And therefore, with the opportunity that we now have of green hydrogen, and my colleague here has just talked about the world now being very interested in green hydrogen, multiple development partners coming in to support green hydrogen. We've just seen a presentation on how these partnerships can assist us fast track this transition. Then there is a massive opportunity for us in terms of reducing the cost of import, the forex that we're going to save, and such aspects. The logistics for importation, bringing it into the country, will also reduce the cost of fertilizer, making our farms more productive and at a lower cost, therefore more competitive. Now, how then do we, or what partnerships then do we need to make this happen? Number one is that investors, there's really no shortage of capital in the world. If you have a good project, every investor, including yourself, if you see a high growth environment, you will put your money in there. And therefore, partnerships are one way to de-risk or reduce investment risk. So the partnerships that we are setting up with GGGI, with all the other development partners, including JICA, World Bank, and the rest, these partnerships help bridge that knowledge gap, awareness gap, so that then investors come and appreciate what we have and the challenges that we have and are able then to support. We know that money is shy. We say money is a coward in economics. That then if the environment is not very conducive, then you have investors not willing to come in and put in their resources. And therefore, to get partnerships on board will help, whether it's partnerships on financing, partnerships on technology, which is very, very important. And I like what I've seen, that the electrolyzer is the front end. How to make the electrolyzer is the back end of the technology. And therefore, if you partner on technology, you partner on knowledge transfer, you are able to leapfrog. We have been successful as KenGen on the geothermal space, not because we buy rigs, not because we put up geothermal plants, but because we have invested a lot in the geothermal labs that we have here. We're able to analyze whatever comes out of the earth, and we're able to tell that, okay, if you drill here, you will be successful. If you change your approach this way, you're going to be successful. And therefore, the investment in knowledge, investment in technology, investment in labs, partnership in those areas and the technology end will help. And lastly, partnership at a continental level. You've seen, I think, on a different field, like the military area, you have NATO, where people ally together to defend their economies. In terms of economic development, you also need partnerships at a continental level. Africa, we're all doing small things. Uganda, Tanzania, Kenya, we're all doing something. If you all band together with our colleagues in the south, in the north, then as one we can speak on green hydrogen and get get the financing that we need to bring projects.
USA, United States of Africa. So Stephen, picking up from Paul's point on partnerships, what financial structures, whether blended finance, concessional loans or PPPs, would you consider most viable to unlock hydrogen to fertilizer projects at scale?
I think the first thing that we need to note is that green hydrogen is very young, right? So if you're speaking about the continent, probably only 1 or 2 projects have really already kicked in. There are many which have been announced, but they haven't yet. And if you think about financing on the second level, financing really comes in, of course, on the development phase, but most of the financing is needed much later at this point. So the point I want to just talk about is this initial phase when you're sort of like about conceptualizing the project is what we really need to be thinking about today. And that's why I really like the initiative that's been announced by GGI in terms of the grants which come on board, sort of like to figure out the feasibility of the project in this case, to sort of like ensure that, as engineer mentioned, that finance is shy, that we get finance from that shy corner to the point where they want to play. Because at the end of the day, to finance these projects, you're going to need equity and debt, usually 70% debt, 30% equity, and those you'll get from commercial markets. Right? And so for those to come in, you need to de-risk that project and take it from the point where it starts, the development phase, all the way to finance close. And the beauty about Kenya is that we've already seen these in the renewable energy space. If you look at some of the projects which have gone on, wind, wind, solar, whatever, all of them have gone through that phase.
Yes.
So if you ask me then, specifically what we need is we need grants a lot in terms of sort of like pushing these projects from where they are today to the point where they're financially feasible and investors can come in. And then after that, over and above in the finance, the contract for differences. Some of those things will make investors to be more interested. Because at the moment, the one challenge we're facing with green hydrogen projects is that we've not really proven the feasibility of them from a financial perspective. So they need a lot of support from that perspective.
Thank you for that. Jane, let's bring it now back to sustainability. As we talk about scale and capital, how can KenGen balance the ambition of hydrogen development with community, which you talked about earlier, and environmental concerns on the ground? And how do we make sure communities see tangible benefits and not just the promises?
Thank you so much for that. One thing that KenGen has been at the forefront, beyond obligation, is to get a social license from pre-feasibility level, engaging the communities. We take them through the stages of what you want to do. We welcome their views. We also co-partner in terms of co-benefits in our projects that we engage to ensure that they are on board, but also they get to have ownership in terms of supplies, materials or services that could be supplied locally. They are given preference. These when we talk about semi-skilled, unskilled labor and all those, even when it comes to security contracts, KenGen ensures that the people who are getting these opportunities are from the local community so that they feel the benefit as well as KenGen does. That really helps us get the social license. We know that soft power is always the best. So bring them along, walk with them the journey, and sometimes it can be quite slow and challenging, but then taking at a pace and strategically aligning with their needs, with our needs, so that we move on.
Thank you so much. So Hyun, let me anchor this round with you, then we'll go to audience questions, and if we have time, I'll come back and do broad spectrum questions, yeah? So looking at experience elsewhere, what models of international cooperation, whether technical, whether it's financial, whether it's policy-based, can Kenya borrow to accelerate hydrogen investment while keeping it sustainable and inclusive?
Okay, for this, I think the voicing out of Kenya, voice out Kenya's opinion is really important in the context of international development. So when I see the African context first, then I want to see how many countries we have the strategic document for the hydrogen. It always suggests a clear direction for the hydrogen industry, but we see only 6 to 7 countries that has its own strategic document so far. So for example, we can easily really count. For example, when we see the IEA's report, then we can see Egypt and Morocco and Mauritania, and also Namibia and Kenya, South Africa, it's all. So we need to really voice out the African context or something else like this. And to do so, I think the coalition between the regional coalition is really important. For example, when we see Europe or Latin America, then we can see there is a really robust coalition between these regions. So I think Africa also needs to voice out this kind of thing. And I think Kenya, especially in East Africa, is really playing an important role to consolidate the ideas between these countries. So I think the regional cooperation is also important, and from the perspective of international development, I think the international organization like GGGI really need to support this kind of aspect. And also, there is another thing that I want to mention, which is the dissemination events or something like this. There is a lot of place that we can voice out our perspective in Africa as well. So actually last week, there was a African Climate Summit, and also there was a Africa Hydrogen Summit in Namibia. And also we have this Kengen Sustainable Energy Conference. At the same time, there is another conference which is happening in South Africa, which is also focusing on the hydrogen. I think we need to really connect all these events so that we can make our own voice. So I think when we link these connections with all of agendas, then we can voice out in a global dialogue space, like we can see the UNFCCC, COP, or we can see the ISO for the private sector as well. So I think all these kind of efforts that can be facilitated by the international organization would be really helpful to support the Kenyan's green hydrogen industry. Yeah.
At this point in time, I'd like to pause and say thank you. Can we acknowledge our panelists, please, for that very interesting conversation. And I'd like to now open the floor to any questions related to our hydrogen conversation. I've got two in the back. Sorry, thank you, Ibrahim. So this sector of the room seems to be more interested. Please state your name, where you're from, and keep your question tight and bright, please.
Thank you so much. My name is Engineer Were from Tatu City. My question goes to the panelists, and especially Kengen. How can we leverage on the green energy technology that we are talking about, given that Kenya has great potential of intermittent energy generation sources like wind and solar that we can use to generate hydrogen and use it as a storage for intermittent sources when they are not there, and address this issue of expensive energy storage systems like batteries, knowing that currently the government has put a freeze on new generations, especially on intermittent ones, because of the grid stability issues.
Can we have the second question, then we'll come back to the panel.
I'm James Cairo from Chemfree. My question is, we note, or it was noted, we are a country that is water scarce. Yet, we have a big ocean. I work in the ocean. My question to GGI, what is your possibility of extracting your hydrogen from the water, from the seawater? And my other question, which is more broader, is yesterday we were discussing nuclear energy. Today we hydrogen energy. and other type of energy, wind and there. If I'm an investor and I want to grant the government a certain amount of money and I've only one option, which one of these status will I go to? Will I go to the nuclear, which is already starting, or would I go to hydrogen, or knowing also the other mixes that we have not exploited? Thank you.
Thank you. Let's come to the panel then. Who wants to step out on the ledge first?
Maybe I will talk about the first question, what KenGen can do, or rather I will say what Kenya can do at this level to leverage on the existing IRI resources. There are some things that we must look at. First, we need low-cost, reliable power. Currently, at the special economic zones, the cost of power is at 10 shillings per kilowatt hour and 7 shillings per kilowatt hour during off-peak. How can we bring this down? Another thing we have to look at is the grid congestion, but also grid losses. We have our electricity located in some of really remote sites where the grid is yet to get there. I know Ketraco is doing a lot of work, but we will need to wheel this power to electrolyzer sites. So we have to look at wheeling charges or tariff. How can we set it? Something that is acceptable, that investors or developers can ride on. That system must be in place. We also have to look at grid losses. Our grid losses right now as it is, how can we modernize or work on our grid so that we reduce these losses? And another thing that we have to address is infrastructure. The hydrogen strategy has said by 2027, we need to do 100% methanol. We literally stop importing. So as well as 20% of nitrogenous fertilizers to be done locally. So we have to set up infrastructure for ammonia synthesis and methanol synthesis. Together with their storage facilities and transport, all that ecosystem must be set in place. So are we looking at hydrogen hubs so that we can make use of common infrastructure to reduce our costs? We also have to look at that, as well as the market mechanisms that Paul referenced earlier. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Stephen, Suhyon, okay.
I was just going to, tongue-in-cheek, respond to the last question of where should you put your money if you come into the energy sector. And I would say, of course, you want to invest in the present and in the future, right? The present, we've seen all the renewable energy sources are already functioning in Kenya, and those are being plugged into the grid and so forth. Of course, the intermediate ones, at the moment you have a challenge, but you have the stable ones, the geothermals and so forth. But then the future is, green hydrogen. If you look at the world and sustainability, and just what green hydrogen promises in terms of the solutions it can be able to fix, the storage element, the transportation element, the things that have been mentioned about, the cost of storage and so forth. I think that's the energy for the future. So I would say in your portfolio, you need to have green hydrogen as one of the sources. Thank you.
Engineer, and then I'll come to Suhyon.
Yeah, thank you very much. So for Engineer Were, I think the issue of the use of wind and solar, there's actually a green hydrogen atlas that has been done, and maybe you can go to the Ministry of Energy website and find that atlas there. It's true, Kenya has immense renewable energy resources, from geothermal, which is very uniquely Kenyan, or in the Rift Valley, to solar and wind. We all know about that, and hydro. And therefore, the big question for you would be offtake. Who would offtake that power if you're going to store it, if you're using hydrogen for storage? So you have a conversation with Kenya Power. They're already here. You can also have captive uses for hydrogen. So that's the thing that you would need to solve for. And then, of course, you need a proper business case. But as a country, we're looking at industrialization. We need to ramp up our power generation capacity, and therefore investors like yourself are encouraged to do that. In terms of where to put your money, I think it's been well elucidated. Hydrogen is the fuel of the future. It's clear that fossil fuel, petroleum, will not be in use in the very near future. Therefore, the fuel, the oil for Kenya in the next few years will be hydrogen. And if we can take advantage, then we will be as prosperous as other countries who found oil.
Yeah, so I want to respond the second question. So I'm really happy that there is so many creative ideas when it comes to climate issues. And also the nuclear and also the salination issues just mentioned. And from GGGI's end, what I can say is, what I would say is, yeah, alignment with the government is always the most important thing. So from our end, we really try to make the alignment with the Green Hydrogen Secretariat and also the Green Hydrogen Committee to list out most profitable green hydrogen projects when it comes to this boosting hydrogen economy. So that's the one thing that I want to say. And the other thing is our member countries, they are really considering manufacturing kind of hydrogen using the nuclear power. So there is a lot of the terminology on hydrogen. That specific hydrogen is called pink hydrogen. So I'm not sure, honestly speaking, I'm not sure if GGGI really support with the pink hydrogen, but because we are always find alignment with the government. If the government of Kenya is really eager to find a solution regarding that, I think from our country team and also as a regional office, I think we need to also voice out this kind of agenda to the HQ and also to the global dialogue. So I think, yeah, it's my response.
Okay, so I've heard about green hydrogen, gray hydrogen, pink hydrogen, all the colors of the rainbow. There's blue hydrogen as well. Okay, and white. Okay, if you want to talk to these guys afterwards, please, because there's all colors of the rainbow for hydrogen. I want to wind this up now, and I'm going to then do a broad question. I'm going to come down the line, starting with Stephen. If you had to pick one near-term priority for Kenya's hydrogen strategy, exports, fertilizer, or domestic use, which would you prioritize and why?
You know, I feel like I'm already cornered with the question because we have a policy that already says that we're focusing on fertilizer.
Okay.
And that's because we are, agriculture, an agricultural economy.
Okay.
So to a great extent, that would also be my pick.
Okay, but I was to ask you then,
if I
was to put it in this way, let me ask, because that one is a bit of a loaded question. So hydrogen projects as a general rule, and we've all learned that, and you've said it yourself, is very capital intensive and very long term. So who should carry the greatest share of risk in Kenya's hydrogen rollout? Government, private investors, or development partners?
I'm a huge proponent of, fixing our own problems.
Okay.
Right? I like using these statistics. USAID, the total budget of USAID that was being used for the entire world was 0.6% of their GDP, right? But then when that was sort of like sniffed out, the whole world caught a cough, right? A cold in this case.
Yeah.
And so if I think about that, I think we need to solve our own issues. So I think as a government, we need to invest and figure out how we're going to get, this green hydrogen movement going. Because relying on development partners, if something happens and they change their priorities, we're the ones who are left sort of like suffering. So I'll say government has to take the greatest risk and initiative to be able to push this forward, of course, with the support of partners and so forth.
Thank you, Stephen. So Jane, engineer, and so on, you have an option. There's two questions. So if I was to pick one near-term priority for Kenya, would it be exports, fertilizer, or domestic use? Or do you want to take the question that's related to who should carry the greatest share of risk in Kenya's hydrogen strategy?
I will take on the second question. Kenya being a low income, just like Morocco, and who is ahead right now? Egypt could be ahead. What we see, even Namibia, the common factor is the government involvement. In Namibia, the government formed a special purpose vehicle to drive funds. It's called, I think, Namibia One or something, to drive funds and to draw international support for their hydrogen development. When we look at Egypt, the Sovereign Fund of Egypt is at the center of mobilizing resources and the projects that are going on. When we look at Morocco again, the government is as a center giving what we call the Offer Maroc some incentives, both fiscal and non-fiscal incentives, to draw on support. And also, like, again, it's for Morocco, whereby we are seeing the issues of feasibility studies for hydrogen projects, given the cost, are being taken off by a government agency, so that when the investors or the private developers are coming in or they are collaborating in these projects, they already have somewhere to begin with. So government has a big role. Thank you.
Thank you. So, engineer, any, mini, money, more? First or second question?
Maybe I can touch on the first and then respond to the second.
We will need to keep it very quick because we're running out of time.
Sure. On the first one, I think the issue would be the use in fertilizer, because right now the complexity of transporting hydrogen, which is a very light molecule, is not yet sorted, so exporting is a hard thing. In terms of who should support hydrogen a lot, I'd go for government, because hydrogen, as has been mentioned, we're in a nascent stage. And if you're a child, you expect your parent to hold you up. And for all other markets, the EU, the Americas, China, everywhere else, the government is stepping in with these contracts of difference to help handhold hydrogen. In the next 10 years, the industry should be able to run on its own. So, short answer, government.
Thank you. Sohyon, last word.
Yeah, thank you. So, what to focus? I think we can just refer to the Kenyan government's the green hydrogen strategy and roadmap. There is a phased approach for this hydrogen industry. So I think, of course, we need to first work on the domestic issues. And second, we need to also boost the demand side using the transportation issues and also the other industrial areas. And last thing would be the exportation. So I think, we need to first focus on the domestic issues, but at the same time, we need to prepare the second and third stage at the same time. So I think this is my response.
So multifaceted approach. Yes. Okay, fine. Sawa. Thank you to all our panelists for a rich and thought-provoking exchange. If we can have a round of applause for them, please. Thank you. So if I was to do a quick distillation in terms of the conversation we've had right now. Number one, my takeaway, hydrogen is an immediate opportunity, not just a distant prospect. From fertilizer to energy security, the case is obviously urgent and very tangible. Second thing I'll take away is financing and safeguards must move together. Investors will not come without risk frameworks, and communities will not support projects without clear environmental and social safeguards. Third takeaway I have here is partnerships are the catalysts. I think we really drilled down on that. Whether between government and private sector or between Kenya and the international partners, hydrogen will only succeed if collaboration sits at its very core. So with that, I'd like to say, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking them again. Our panelists, Paul Mbogo, Dr. Jane Mbogo, Stephen Gugu, and Sohyon Kang. If you can be front and center so we can beat you a picture. And then I'll ask Ibrahim to come and wrap this session up at least. So, cameraman, please, if we could have a picture with our panelists.
Thank you very much, Waweru Njoroge, for taking us through that session, and a special thanks to our panelists who've done this, made this very, very understandable for the audiences here. It is time, ladies and gentlemen, to take a break. This is how we're going to do it. We have one more session left. We also have a masterclass later. And let me tell you something about the masterclass. If I could have the details about the masterclass